Okay, in this video, we're going to look at monetary inflation as viewed from the perspective of monetarists like Milton Friedman. Okay, so we have our model here. We have our aggregate demand model. We have our short and aggregate supply model, and we have our long run aggregate supply model. We got to label the axes. This is the price level. This is real GDP. Aggregate demand is the downward sloping line because this has negative slope. That's aggregate demand. Short and aggregate supply is the upward sloping line. And then long run aggregate supply is at this value of $15 trillion. And notice we're in a situation where the short run aggregate supply and aggregate demand intersect at long run aggregate supply. So the underlying assumption here is the neoclassical or classical assumption that over the long run, unemployment is neither too low or too high. Over the long run, unemployment will be near its natural level. GDP will be near its potential GDP level. Okay, so those are the assumptions of this particular model. The economy is not. I give you that GDP is $15 trillion down here, right? So I could plug 15 into my short and aggregate supply curve, and I get 14.5. I could plug it in the aggregate demand curve, and I still get 14.5. So the equilibrium price level is 14.5. The GDP level is $15 trillion. GDP is equal to potential, right? So the output gap is 0. So over the long run, there is no gap, and unemployment is equal to the natural rate. Okay, so equal to the natural rate, right? So those are the answers to those questions there. All right, now suppose this aggregate demand model here is a result of the Federal Reserve stimulating the economy by lowering interest rates. Okay, and typically central banks, they can keep interest rates too long or too low for too long, right? And you can read this link here and this link here to read more about that. But if they keep interest rates too low for too long, what they end up doing is they end up pushing us into an inflationary gap. So this is holding interest rates too low, too long. Investment expenditures are higher than they would have been. Exports are higher than they would have been. Consumption maybe perhaps is higher than it would have been. Okay, so it pushes us in an inflationary gap. Now I give you the GDP levels down here. I give you the GDP level of $16 trillion, right? If we solve these two equations for real GDP, we'll get 16. And then if I plug 16 into here and 16 into here, I'll get 15.5, but I give it to you right there, so there's no reason to do it. I can show you in Desmos that. The new aggregate demand curve is 19.5 minus 0.25 y. The short aggregate supply curve was negative 0.5 plus y right there. So there's my original. Let me change the colors here. This is black. This one up here is red. Okay, I also need the vertical line. Potential GDP is at 15. Let me make sure I got this right. I think I'm messing something up. Short aggregate supply is negative 0.5 plus y. Oh, I typed 1 there. And the new aggregate demand curve is 19.5 minus 0.25 y. The original demand curve, the original demand curve is 18.25. Okay, and I can blow that area up right there. See that? There we go. So initially we're at this point here where GDP equals potential. But then monetary stimulus puts us out here in an inflationary gap where GDP is 16 and inflation is 15.5. Okay. So GDP is 16 and inflation is 15.5. Okay, so if nothing else is done, if that monetary stimulus is not removed, if fiscal policy remains the same, what we'll end up doing is we'll have really, really low unemployment. Okay, we'll have really, really low unemployment because GDP is beyond the potential value of GDP. So unemployment is going to be really, really low. And we're going to upward pressure on prices. So until that happens, we're kind of having a good time here, aren't we? Unemployment's really, really low. Our incomes are soaring. It's easy to find work. And prices are being pushed up because there's so much demand for product, prices generally rise. Now, we have economic growth because GDP is higher, right? It was 16, it is 16, it was 15, right? This is our equation of exchange in percent change form. This is the percent change in money. This is the percent change in velocity. This is the percent change in the price level, also known as the inflation rate. And this is the percent change in GDP, real GDP, also known as economic growth. And so in this monetarist school, the quantitative theory of money, the economic growth rate plus the inflation rate equals the percent change in velocity plus the percent change in money. Now, in this classical model, velocity is constant, assumed to be constant. So there's no change in velocity, right? So now we have to calculate the economic growth rate, which is the percent change in GDP. Okay, it was 16, or it is 16, it was 15. So what it is minus what it was divided by what it was times 100, 100 is 6.7%. So our economic growth rate is 6.67%. The inflation rate is, the price level is 15.5. The price level was 14.5. So we have what it is minus what it was divided by what it was times 100. So the inflation rate is 6.9%, right? And this is called monetary inflation, right? So if velocity is 0 and inflation is 6.9% and economic growth is 6.67%, if I add these two together, I get a percent change in money equal to 11.56, right? 11.56%. And this is called monetary inflation. Now, this is what's going on in the short run. So you increase the money supply by 13.56%, you goose the economy, and you can get a short run gain in GDP of 6.67%, but that's accompanied by some inflation, right? Because remember, unemployment's really, really low. Everybody has jobs. Some people are working 2 jobs. Maybe some people are working some overtime. People have lots of income. Demand is for products is high. That tends to bid prices up, so we have inflation, right? So in the short run, you do have inflation, but you also have higher GDP, right? So up along the short and aggregate supply curve is what happens in the short run, right? But then what happens when unemployment is really, really low? When unemployment is really, really low, right, it is below the natural unemployment rate, So this puts upward pressure on wages and the prices of other production inputs like energy. Okay, so Keynesians and non-classicalists argue that this will cause the short and aggregate supply curve to shift upward. Okay, it'll shift it upward. Wages are going up and energy prices are going up. So this short and aggregate supply curve shifts upward, which is a decrease in supply. Because when you look at supply, when you're looking at the what happens to supply, you go horizontal and you can see that GDP fell, right? So we have this new short and aggregate supply curve, the blue line, and it'll keep shifting upward or leftward until the gap is closed. So the gap is big here, the gap is 0 there, right? And when you plug 15 into the new GDP, 15 right here, which is the potential GDP level, when you plug that into the blue short and aggregate supply curve, you get a price level of 15.75. Okay? Going back to our theory of our equation of exchange, right, in percent changes, velocity is 0%, right? And this is over the long run. So over the long run, you go from black to blue, right? You go from black to blue. When you go from black to blue, there's no change in GDP. 15 minus 15 divided by 15 is 0, right? So there's no change in GDP. But there is an increase in the price level. The price level goes from black to blue, from 14.5 to 15.75. So what it is, minus what it was originally, divided by what it was originally, times 100 is 8.62%. So you get 8.62% here. And when you add these two together, it adds up to this. So the change in money, percent change in money must be 8.62%. Okay? So Friedman basically said that inflation is a monetary problem. And if the percent change in money is 8.62%, the inflation rate will eventually be 8.62%. Right? Okay, so from the initial condition, the intersection of the black lines at the black dot, right, to the scenario here, the long run scenario, over the long run, the blue dot, where the red demand curve crosses the blue supply curve at long run aggregate supply, the shifts in aggregate demand and short aggregate supply cause real GDP to not change. It causes the price level to increase. And according to the quantity theory of money, 100% or all of the increase in the price level is caused by the growth in the money supply.